name's Alison and it is September and this is my YouTube clip, and there's quite a bit of talking initially on this because I want to, well, the clip's about pelvic tilt and pelvic clock and why it's such a useful exercise, and then I'll kind of demonstrate it. So there are people who would maybe think it's such a little slip of an exercise, it doesn't even count as an exercise, but it's really useful, it's really foundational. And it's got loads of benefits. So first of all, where is the pelvis? I'm going to show you, sort of on me if I may. This is the pelvis. So you've got the two pubic bones at the front, and if you kind of hold on to the bones there, that's the pelvis. And the spine coming down here, and the sacrum, the base of the spine, sits in the back of the pelvis, and then at the base of the spine, also involved in the pelvis, you've got the tailbone. So you can sort of tease out what's pelvic movement and what's spine, but in reality, they kind of move together. And if you get a good pelvic tilt, you start to gently mobilise the back, and that can be really, really useful if your lower back is a little bit stiff. But the pelvis in and of itself can be stiff. And you know, you need the pelvis mobile for good walking, for good gait, for good running. I know we don't think of it, we think of our thighs, we think of the body, but the pelvis in and of itself has some movement. And you can liberate that or enhance it by this great thing that is the pelvic tilt. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate now. So the most common way to do pelvic tilt or pelvic clock, and by the way, sometimes I will use pelvic clock and pelvic circles interchangeably, I mean the same thing. So the most basic way to do it is lying down. So here I am lying down, and here's my pelvis, and there's my north-south tilt. So you can feel the pubic bones up and down, your knobbly bits at the front. You can have a feel. Don't be thinking, oh no, I'm too fat, I can't feel those. No, you'll be able to get to them. Have a feel, you'll feel them move. You can't so easily feel the tailbone, the base of the spine move, but in actual fact, it moves more than anything else. You might feel it on the mat, but you can't feel it with your hands necessarily. So north to south tilt. It's less common, but it's a thing. Go east to west. So one half rises and then the other half rises. Okay, so that's pelvic tilt, and it's much simpler. If you struggle with pelvic clock, stick with pelvic tilt. Here's your clock. So you're making a circle shape. Imagine joining the dots on your north, south, east, west. With all of these exercises, the key is to relax, let go, and feel as if the bones move themselves. You want to get away from a sense that you can grip with your stomach or the glutes at the back of your bottom muscles or the front of the thighs. Get away from the sense that you can force this. You can't. You want to get away from tension. The bones move themselves. I'm going to change direction. Go slow, go steady. You'll maybe feel a little bit of grippiness. I tend to feel it in the front of my thighs. See if you can let go. Allow the mat to hold you. Feel yourself sink down. Definitely don't hold your breath. If you want to coordinate with the breathing, don't worry too much about that, because coordinating the breathing can give you another thing to kind of think about and maybe worry about and get confused about. But if you're on board with your breathing, then as you curve into the floor, that spine flexion, top half of the curve, breathe out. And as you curve away from the floor, if you can see that on me, spine extension, breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. You might
feel your legs involved, because of course the thigh bone comes in and sits in the pelvis. So the bigger you make the move, the more you'll feel your legs move. So if you are stiff in your back and it tends to curve under, you can encourage the spine to liberate and move away from the floor. If, like me, you tend to arch the back away from the floor, you're too sort of grippy in the back that way, then again, conversely, you can use the same exercise to liberate and encourage your spine to curve into the floor. In a minute, I'm going to show you some seated alternatives, but just before I do, if you're still in lying and you've got a squishy ball, this can give you an alternate way to get to the exercise. You want the ball like it's frankly about to give up the will to live, not too much air in it. Stick it, and it's sort of on your sacrum, it's not on your bottom, it's on the bones, that base of the spine. And just imagine you're drawing round the ball. So that, a lot of people really prefer that, but just a word of warning, some people hate this. They prefer to be on the floor. Okay? And the other thing I've also, some people quite like, is actually to have your pelvis completely lift off the floor. Now there's more load and more force in the legs with this, but it does at least liberate you from the floor. So it's like your pelvis is a swing hanging from your thighs. Always be aware that you're aiming in the pelvic clock for a full circle. Sometimes you can get little stuck bits, and they're the ones that that's the bit that you want to focus on the most. You're aiming for a full circle. A little sticky stuck bit, you could almost kind of work on that bit alone just to liberate the full movement. Anyway, I'll go to sitting now.
Okay then, so seated pelvic tilts and pelvic clocks. Okay, just before I do them, I want to give you one last bit of pelvic anatomy, familiar to those of you who've done my classes, but I know you haven't all. Okay, and it's this bone here, your sit bones. And they're well named. Ideally, we should sit on them. So a pelvic tilting is really helpful for sort of reinforcing, there I am, spine curves back, spine curves forward. My pelvis is almost going over the sit bones, and then I'm on my sit bones, and then my pelvis is kind of forward of the sit bones. So it helps you to get a sense of where your pelvis is in seated, and to remind you when you're on your sit bones as opposed to having the sit bones relatively forward, where, you know, obviously we do often tend to slouch back, don't we? Or where equally though you might tend to arch forward with the sit bones relatively at the back. So you can sit and do this exercise. It will loosen off the pelvis, it will loosen off a tight lower back, and it will get you thinking, okay, where's the midpoint? When am I sitting up on my sit bones? Talking of which, you can use them if you're doing pelvic clocks or circles. So imagine drawing a circle around your two sit bones. Again, feel light, don't force it, sense that the bones kind of move themselves. As you move, you will feel, as ever, the weight shift into one foot or the other foot, and this is a good thing. You actually are going to come back to stopping. So I'm on my sit bones there, but I also, when I'm sitting tall on my sit bones, I've also got a little bit of weight through the legs and into the feet. You can often lose that if you tend to sit back into the lower back, because you're sort of relatively back, so there's not so much weight in the feet. So at the end of your tilts, think, am I on my sit bones? Have I got a little bit of weight through the feet? One last thing about pelvic tilts. They're a great way to get movement into the pelvic floor. Who knew, eh? But the thing is, the important muscles of pelvic floor are all attached to your tailbone. And when you pelvic tilt, the tailbone moves more than anything else. It moves more than the rest of the pelvis. You can sit and do it yourself. You can, I can't really show you my own tailbone, but you'll take this one on trust, or do it in your, feel it in your own body. When you tilt, the tailbone tucks under and the tailbone sticks out. Tailbone tucks under, tailbone sticks out. And it moves more, say, relatively than, say, the pubic bone or the pubic bones. Okay, so when you do pelvic tilt, and because the pelvic floor attaches to the tailbone, every time you tilt, you tug on the and pull on the pelvic floor one way, it contracts and then it relaxes. It contracts, it relaxes. So you get movement, you get a little bit of work into pelvic floor. And then it's also really helpful to the pelvic floor if in your resting state in the chair, it doesn't have to be all the time, that you're in that midpoint and you're sitting on your sit bones rather than on the sacrum, which is not so good for pelvic floor, at least for most of us. It's better for us, it's better for our pelvic floor to sit up on the sit bones there. Okay. And one last thing, you can do pelvic tilts in standing, but they're tricky. And if you're going to have a go, always stand up. I think my head might get cut off here. But if you're going to have a go, bend your knees. It's much easier to get the tilt. If you stand up with straight legs, it's much, much harder. But I'm going to sign off there. So that's it until October. Can you believe that? October. But it's only September now, so cheerio. Hi there. I do hope you found this clip useful. We've got plenty more on the site, and for now I've suggested another one for you to watch. If you want to know more about what we do in Leeds, then do visit the website at pilates-leeds.com, and right now you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and we can do this all again next month. Cheerio!